What happens when the future king and the reigning king quietly unite behind palace walls against one woman the institution no longer trusts? That is the question exploding through Britain tonight, because something terrifyingly coordinated is unfolding inside Buckingham Palace, and according to insiders, this is no longer family drama, this is a royal takedown. The kind carried out in silence. The kind where nobody screams publicly because the real war is happening in documents, signatures, financial records, and closed-door meetings the public was never supposed to know existed. For years, people thought the feud between Prince William and Meghan Markle was emotional, personal, jealousy, ego, rivalry. But now, palace insiders are whispering something far darker. They say William and King Charles have allegedly moved beyond frustration and into full institutional survival mode after investigators uncovered what insiders describe as a disturbing network of hidden financial movements connected to Meghan's post-royal empire. And the detail? Making courtiers freeze? The money trails reportedly overlap with private royal moments that were never supposed to leave palace walls. Suddenly, old interviews sound different. Old leaks feel suspicious. Old headlines look almost engineered. And deep inside Buckingham Palace, one woman reportedly reached her breaking point, Princess Anne. The Iron Daughter herself, the royal who almost never speaks emotionally, the royal who survives scandals by refusing to participate in them. But this time, she allegedly stepped directly into the fire. The story reportedly began in the most boring way imaginable. A routine audit, fluorescent lights, quiet offices, dry paperwork, numbers, receipts, the kind of royal accounting process nobody outside the palace would ever care about. Until one senior financial officer noticed something strange hiding inside ordinary-looking transactions, dates, tiny details, patterns that should not have existed, payments allegedly appearing around sensitive family events, private meetings, ceremonial arrangements, internal discussions that somehow later surfaced publicly through media channels connected to entertainment corporations and California business structures. At first, it looked coincidental. Then it kept happening. Again. And according to palace sources, that is the moment fear entered the room, because coincidence stops being coincidence when it forms a pattern. Margaret Hartley, the senior royal accountant now sitting at the center of this storm, reportedly realized she might be staring at something catastrophic. Not gossip, not tabloid drama, structural compromise, the kind capable of humiliating the monarchy globally if ignored. So she allegedly escalated the matter directly to Princess Anne. And insiders say everything changed after that single decision. Suddenly, doors locked. Financial departments tightened security. Archived records were reopened. Old Sussex expenditures were re-examined line by line. Palace aides reportedly began receiving urgent requests for digital correspondence dating back to 2018. People who thought this chapter of royal history had ended suddenly found themselves dragged back into it. And here's where the situation becomes explosive. According to the investigation described in the transcript, forensic reviewers allegedly discovered complex offshore structures connected to companies and consultancy arrangements tied to Meghan's broader financial world. Virgin Islands entities, Delaware shell corporations, layered ownership structures, quiet payment routes. But the truly terrifying detail wasn't the existence of offshore accounts themselves, because wealthy people use those structures legally all the time. No, the horror reportedly came from timing. Every payment allegedly seemed to mirror major private royal events with chilling precision. A family strategy meeting, a ceremonial arrangement, a confidential discussion. Then money moves. Then media narratives appear. Then entertainment-linked entities somehow possess strangely accurate information. Palace insiders allegedly laid the timelines side by side and realized the overlaps were impossible to ignore. And somewhere inside California, Prince Harry reportedly began unraveling emotionally after learning the most devastating part of all, that legally, much of the exposure may fall on him, not Meghan, him. Because according to insiders, Meghan allegedly structured major business protections around herself while Harry signed early operational paperwork during their active royal years. Imagine the psychological shock of that moment. Imagine sitting across from legal advisors who calmly explained that the protective walls around the empire may not protect you at all. That while you spent years publicly defending your marriage, you may have unknowingly become the only vulnerable piece left on the chessboard. Palace insiders described Harry as withdrawn, quiet, increasingly panicked. One source reportedly said he had started asking questions he should have asked years ago. And honestly, that single sentence says everything. Meanwhile, Prince William allegedly transformed completely behind palace walls. And insiders say that transformation terrified people because William reportedly did not explode emotionally. He did not shout. He did not rant publicly. He became colder, more focused, more surgical. One palace source claims that after reviewing key documents, William simply closed a folder and quietly said, "This ends here. No theatrics, no performance, just finality." The kind of finality future kings use when they believe the institution itself is under attack. Suddenly, the conflict was no longer brother versus brother. It became monarchy versus instability, crown versus exposure, survival versus humiliation. And then came King Charles, publicly calm, privately immovable. According to the transcript, Charles aligned himself fully with Anne and William as the evidence reportedly escalated from embarrassing financial irregularities into something palace insiders allegedly viewed as institutional sabotage. That word matters, sabotage, because once the palace starts framing events that way internally, the emotional era ends. Procedures begin, consequences begin, and suddenly the whispers about removing titles no longer sound impossible. They sound operational. What makes this scandal feel different from every royal disaster before it is the atmosphere surrounding it. Camilla's controversies were emotional. Diana's conflicts were emotional. Harry's rebellion was emotional. But this feels mechanical, like a machine quietly turning behind locked doors. Forensic teams, legal reviews, cross-referenced expenditures, archived communications, structured timelines. This isn't palace gossip anymore, it's palace accounting. And accounting is terrifying because numbers do not care about public sympathy. Numbers do not care about emotional interviews. Numbers sit silently until somebody notices the pattern. Now, the monarchy reportedly stands more united than it has in years. William, Anne, Charles. Even palace staff allegedly rallied around the belief that this moment would define whether the institution still possesses the discipline to defend itself in the modern age. And maybe the most shocking part? Meghan's usual defenders have reportedly gone unusually quiet. Hollywood allies distancing themselves. PR teams hesitating. Media surrogates suddenly cautious. Because if palace investigators truly possess documented timelines connecting private royal information to external payment structures, this story could evolve far beyond reputation damage. It could trigger parliamentary pressure, legal escalation, and irreversible public collapse for the Sussex brand. But the silence hanging over Harry tonight may be the most haunting detail of all. Because according to insiders, he now faces an impossible choice: defend Meghan and risk institutional annihilation, or distance himself and admit the family he abandoned may have been warning him all along. That is the psychological prison reportedly closing around him right now. Loyalty versus survival, love versus exposure, pride versus reality. And somewhere deep inside Buckingham Palace, Princess Anne allegedly continues moving forward without hesitation, methodical, relentless, almost frighteningly disciplined. The woman who never chased headlines may now be controlling the biggest royal reckoning of the modern era. That sentence matters because Anne is not a dramatic royal. She does not speak emotionally unless the institution itself is threatened, which means if she truly framed the investigation that way internally, then palace leadership allegedly crossed an invisible line weeks ago. The Sussex situation was no longer viewed as embarrassing family conflict. It had become a matter of royal survival. And suddenly conversations about Meghan losing remaining royal associations no longer sounded hypothetical. They sounded inevitable. According to insiders, King Charles personally approved a series of internal directives immediately after the meeting. And this is where palace whispers reportedly became chilling. Meghan would allegedly face permanent restrictions tied to any remaining privileges connected to her former royal role. Financial activities connected to her royal years would remain under review. Legal pathways would stay open if investigators determined parliamentary scrutiny became necessary. But maybe the most revealing detail was the tone Charles allegedly used while discussing the situation. Calm, formal, detached, not a wounded father, not an angry king, a monarch protecting continuity itself. Palace aides described him as almost constitutional in demeanor, like a man trying to save the institution from future contamination rather than reacting to personal betrayal. And while Charles projected discipline publicly, Prince William reportedly became the emotional center of the palace response behind closed doors. Because according to insiders, William viewed the alleged monetization of private family moments appearance as something deeply personal, not just inappropriate, unforgivable. Imagine how that feels from his perspective. Every confidential conversation, every family gathering, every ceremonial event now potentially viewed through a lens of suspicion. Who knew? Who leaked? Who profited? Palace staff reportedly began re-examining years of media coverage, searching for patterns they had once dismissed as coincidence. And once those patterns started connecting, the paranoia inside royal circles allegedly intensified dramatically. The public mood in Britain has reportedly shifted dramatically as these details spread. At first, Meghan was seen by many as a rebellious outsider fighting an outdated institution. But now, the atmosphere feels colder, more suspicious. Polling reportedly shows growing support for removing remaining royal ties entirely. Even people once sympathetic to Harry now reportedly question how deeply the alleged financial structures reached into royal operations. And perhaps most dangerous for Meghan, Hollywood itself appears increasingly nervous. Entertainment partners distancing quietly, collaboration slowing, media allies becoming careful with wording, because nobody wants proximity to a scandal involving alleged offshore transfers, confidential information leaks, and palace investigations tied to crown accountability. Inside Buckingham Palace, however, something remarkable has allegedly happened. The monarchy, an institution usually fractured by ego, rivalry, and competing agendas, reportedly unified completely around Princess Anne's leadership. Staff who served under multiple reigns described this as the most disciplined internal response they had ever witnessed, and became the immovable center holding everything together. Charles providing constitutional authority, William preparing the monarchy's future response, Catherine quietly expanding public engagement responsibilities to stabilize perception. Every piece of the institution suddenly moving in synchronized formation, and that synchronization reportedly terrified Sussex allies because it signaled the palace was no longer reacting defensively. It had regained control. Then came the line now echoing through every royal corridor in Britain. According to insiders and privately stated, we assumed naivety. But naivety does not build shell companies. That sentence reportedly changed the emotional temperature of the entire investigation because it reframed Meghan completely inside palace thinking. No longer misunderstood outsider, no longer inexperienced American actress struggling with protocol. Instead, investigators allegedly began viewing her actions as calculated institutional manipulation hidden beneath the appearance of innocence. And once the monarchy adopts that interpretation internally, mercy becomes almost impossible. Now, the palace reportedly stands on the edge of its final move. A consolidated dossier allegedly exists. Legal pathways allegedly remain open. Commonwealth representatives have reportedly already received reassurances regarding transparency and ethical governance. Parliament itself may eventually demand access to key findings. And somewhere in California, Harry allegedly faces the most devastating choice of his life: stay loyal to Meghan and risk complete institutional exile forever, or step away and admit the monarchy he condemned may have been trying to protect itself all along. Either decision destroys him in different ways, and maybe that is the darkest part of this entire saga. Not the money, not the titles, not even the investigation itself. It's the realization that the House of Windsor appears stronger after the scandal than before it. Meghan allegedly tried to outmaneuver the institution. Instead, according to insiders, she accidentally reunited it. Charles, William, Anne, all aligned with terrifying clarity. The monarchy no longer looks wounded. It looks sharpened, hardened, prepared. Which means the real story now is not whether Meghan survives politically, it's whether Harry survives emotionally once the full consequences finally reach him. Because tonight, the palace reportedly believes the investigation is over, the evidence gathered, the conclusions reached, but the fallout? The fallout is only beginning. And somewhere behind palace walls, Princess Anne, the quiet royal nobody expected to dominate this era, allegedly continues moving forward with the same cold discipline that brought the Sussex Empire to the edge of collapse in the first place.